we can start the video without a nice sip of coffee. Alright YouTube, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ilias, I'm a photographer located in Athens, Greece, and in today's video we're going to talk about how my Nikon Zfc performed and what pictures I got during a baptism, a professional shoot that I did last month in Germany. So basically what happened is a cousin of mine got married in Hamburg, Germany, and she told me if I want to be the photographer of the wedding, and of course I accepted because I can build my portfolio that way. And by the time I got there, I talked to some people here and there and I landed some more jobs, which is always nice. And one of the jobs that I did in Germany is this baptism that we're going to talk about in this video over here. And the point of this video is going to be educational, so you can see how an entry-level camera, at least in my eyes, like the Nikon Zfc, can perform in this type of professional situations. What lenses did they use, how the overall image quality was, how the autofocus was, and stuff like that. So you can judge for yourself if your entry-level DSLR or mirrorless can perform in these professional situations. Spoiler alert, in my opinion, you can do many professional jobs with your basic DSLR and mirrorless. About a year ago, I owned a Nikon D3400, which is a $200 DSLR, and I did quite a few professional jobs, and none of my clients ever had anything bad to say about it. So yeah, anyways, enough with the rambling. Let's talk briefly about what gear I used. So basically, like I said earlier, my main camera is the Nikon Zfc, which is filming me right now. The main lens that I used is the Viltrox 23mm 1.4. It's a pretty cheap and inexpensive lens, but it gets the job done. It's basically a 35mm equivalent for full frame, and that 1.4 aperture is pretty handy in these darker situations, like let's say you're inside of a church, like we're going to discuss in this video over here right now. Also, the Viltrox 23mm 1.4 is filming me right now in 1.4 aperture, so you can see the autofocus keeps up real nice. Yeah, that's about it. We're going to talk about this lens and how it performed in a moment. And the other lens that I used is basically the 85mm 1.8 from Viltrox as well. It's a pretty inexpensive lens on its own for what it's offering. The image quality is superior from the 23mm, but we're going to talk about it as well in just a moment. And I also brought with me a flash. I think it's the Nikon SB500. Let me check the name. Yes, it's the Nikon SB500 over here. Yeah, I found it used. I bought it before the baptism. I had never used it before, but it was really useful. So in the upcoming weeks, you're going to see more videos about my professional shoots that I did in Germany. I filmed the whole wedding day on my GoPro, so we're going to do a massive breakdown about the whole day and how my Nikon Zfc performed and how I performed in this professional situation. And also we're going to do another video about the engagement session. I have filmed again the whole behind the scenes, so you can have a better understanding on how these things work. I'm not a long-time professional, as you can see. I have a small experience, but for educational purposes and, I don't know, fun purposes, I think it would be nice to show the world these situations, especially for beginner photographers who want to see how it is like to do these shoots for the first time and stuff like that. For this particular video, for the baptism, I didn't film the ritual at all, so we're just going to see images here and there, and you can judge for yourself if I did a good job or not. The clients itself were really happy, so let's do a timeline of the shots and explain to you what basically happened. So I got to the church about 45 minutes before the ritual started, so I can do some shots before we get inside. So I quickly did some item shots first in order to get them out of my way, to not have to worry about them later. These are some pretty simple shots from the cross, from the shoes and stuff like that. You can see on the details that I listed which lens I used for every shot and what the settings are. And after I finished with the item shots, I quickly grabbed some photos from the guests and also some family shots here and there, but the light was pretty harsh and the photos turned out, I don't know how to describe it, but these are not my favorite photos of the day. After the ritual, I brought everyone in the shade and we did some nice family shots, family portraits. Here in the beginning, we got some shots here and there right before the ritual, and we had all the time of the world after the ritual in order to get the bangers that we want in the album and on the final results. So we got inside of the church, and here is basically where I switched to the 23mm 1.4 because I didn't have the space in order to use my 85mm. I need something wide in order to have the room to move around and also capture the whole scene. And again, the 1.4 aperture is what really saved me in this dark environment. So you can see I tried out a few different frames. I tried to use the candles in front of me in order to add some depth in some of the images, and I also got some nice action shots over here, and I also got a few nice reactions from the kid itself. So yeah, I think the shots from the ritual itself were pretty successful. The 23mm is the lens to go in this situation, at least in my opinion. Maybe a 50mm could also play a nice role in order to get a little bit closer, get some detailed shots and stuff like that, and also get some more separation from your targets with the background. But I think the 23mm performed really nice and it produced some really outstanding images. So during the ritual, they tried to change the clothes from the baby after it got wet inside that thing where the christening is happening. I quickly changed to my 85mm in order to get some nice compressed shot of the baby changing, and after the whole baptism ended, we went outside and we did some nice family portraits. I started off by using the 85mm for some nice compressed shots of the father, the mother, the kid and stuff like that, but later on, when more of the family gathered in order to take some shots, I switched to the 23mm, which is wider, in order to get everyone the photos, and I also tried a few portraits with a 23mm, which I think look pretty nice. They don't have that compressed, bokeh-licious look, but in my opinion they look quite nice. I love the shots, my clients love the shots, and overall I'm pretty happy with the gear that I chose in these situations. So right now let me talk about my thoughts about the positives and the negatives from the Nikon Zfc in this situation. First and foremost, let's talk about the autofocus capabilities of this camera. So basically the autofocus mode that I used the most in this situation is the IAF, but with a white box on the middle of it. So basically the IAF tracks only objects which is inside of this white box, which I can move around the screen. This was really helpful because the camera wouldn't autofocus on some random persons left and right on the screen, and only focused on the persons that were inside of my box that I choose where to leave it. And the autofocus itself was pretty snappy. It always found the eye really fast, blazingly fast, but it wasn't always that accurate. Most of the shots were tack sharp on the eye, but not always. It's not a huge problem because I kept bursting, and maybe 1 out of the 5 or 6 or 7 shots was slightly out of focus. Maybe the lens focused on the eyebrow, or the focus jumped on a person next to the baby, which I didn't wanted it to focus, but it is what it is. I had no problems at all in order to get the shots that I wanted. So as far as my concerns about the autofocus, I got all the keeper shots that I wanted without really having to worry about my autofocus capabilities of my camera. So yeah, I think that this is a pretty huge plus for me, that an entry-level mirrorless camera is really reliable in terms of the autofocus. It's not as reliable as some high-end Canon and Sonys and like the Nikon Z9, but for these type of situations where you're not photographing Usain fucking Bolt or Cristiano Ronaldo, the autofocus is pretty reliable and you don't have to worry that you're going to miss. This camera is pretty fast. It shoots at 9-11 frames per second. I don't really know. So if one of the shots or two are out of focus or slightly out of focus, it doesn't really matter. I got all the shots that I wanted, and this camera keeps doing that for the past year, so I'm pretty happy about that. Let's also talk a little bit about the image quality that the Nikon Zfc produced in these situations. So basically the Nikon Zfc has a 20 megapixel sensor, which is more than enough obviously for every type of situations, unless you're doing some high quality printing or stuff like that, let's say for billboards or some massive ad campaigns. Obviously if I ever get jobs like that, I'm not going to use a 20 megapixel sensor. The ISO performance is not the performance that you get out of a full frame camera, because obviously we have to deal with a smaller sensor, but this camera can handle 2500 ISO like a beast. You're obviously going to get some noise, but you can always use some noise reduction on Lightroom. Let's say +5, +10 noise reduction really doesn't show on the prints or on the final images. So yeah, I think this camera does a really nice job, and you really don't have to worry about pushing this camera to the limits, like using 10,000 ISO or something like that. In both the wedding and on the baptism, I never had to go above 2500 ISO personally, and to everyone that I showed the pictures on in order to get some second opinion, stuff like that. They all love the photos, they all love the image quality, so yeah, I have nothing to complain about. About the 23mm which is filming me right now, I got this lens for 240 euros brand new, which is a steal, to be honest. Even at f1.4 it is really sharp. The autofocus performance is really nice even at f1.4. What I don't like is that at f1.4, f1.8 the chromatic aberration is really harsh, and also the vignetting at f1.4 is, it's crazy. It has a crazy amount of vignetting. I think you can see on the corners how harsh the vignetting actually is over here. I'm at f1.4 right now, and holy shit, this corner over here is dark as fuck. Holy shit. Obviously it's not a premium lens, but for its price and for what it offers, I can live with it. And again, for 240 euros, oof, this baby over here is a steal. So the positives again, pretty sharp, even at f1.4, autofocus is really quick and snappy. The bad ones is the heavy vignette that we get on the corners at f1.4 and the huge chromatic aberration that we get at f1.4 as well. You can clean it up, but not always. At f2.8 the lens mostly clears up and it becomes really sharp and without any chromatic aberration at all. I also love the build quality of this particular lens, so yeah, I'm going to do a dedicated video on this lens later on the channel. So if you want to check it out, hit the subscribe button and turn on the notifications. Holy shit, I cannot speak today. So you can keep an eye out for that one. And the other lens that I used is basically the 85mm 1.8, again from Viltrox. This baby is really sharp. The chromatic aberration is minimum. At least in my eyes, I cannot seem to find a large amount of it even at f1.8. The vignetting is also there at f1.8, but it's nothing to worry about. It's nothing like the 23mm. It's barely noticeable on the 85mm, and I think it's the perfect lens for my portraits. On the crop sensor camera, you need something that can produce some nice bokeh in order to get this professional look, especially in this type of situations. Obviously that's not always what we want, but for some nice family portraits, in order to get that separation, you need something with lots of compression. The only sad part is that this 85mm becomes a 127 I think millimeter on a crop sensor camera, so I don't have a lot of room in order to move around, so I cannot use this lens as often as I want, especially in tight environments. So I mostly use it for portraits and in outside environments. Alright, I think I covered almost everything. Wait, I didn't talk about the flash. I think I didn't use the flash as much as I thought I would use it. I used it mostly on the wedding, on the avenue after the wedding. It's not hard to use at all. I know it can be pretty intimidating if you have never used one of these bad boys on the past, but you can play around with it, do some practice and stuff like that, and you will eventually find out how to use them properly. I think it's a pretty useful tool to have in your camera bag. The SB500 works perfectly with my Nikon Zfc. It's a small, lightweight flash, pretty powerful for its price, so yeah, I don't think there is much to talk about. Alright you guys, I think this is where I'm going to end the video. I think I covered almost everything that I needed to cover about the Nikon Zfc and how it performed in this professional situation. If you have any more questions, whatever questions they might be, let them down below on the comments and I will answer all of them. If you're new here and you want to see more content like that about using budget gear in every photographic situation, make sure to subscribe, and if you enjoy this content, make sure to drop a like. It really helps out with the algorithm. So yeah, enjoy a slideshow of my favorite pictures of that shoot in the end of the video right now. See you next time, take care, peace.